Ora, maybe our support person is Ora, and you know, I'm not checking anymore the who is in the waiting room. You can do that from now, right? And
yes, I can.
Beautiful. Um, yeah. And so I'm sitting here in Buffalo, New York. I'm not from here originally, but I'm here with my beloved Dawn. Um, so originally I come from Israel, and I've spent most of my life there, and that life included actually a big search after meaning since I was a very, very little child. I will not go into the whole biography, but because of this search, I actually, at a certain age, I decided, at a young age, I decided to check my own tradition, my ancestors' tradition, which is the Kabbalist tradition. And I decided to do that not in any modern way, but actually in the old-fashioned way. And I went and became a religious person. And I thought I'm doing it for a short while. It took me decades. In these decades, I was ordained as a rabbi. I started to teach in the rabbinical institutes. Actually, sometimes was teaching in the Institute for Ordination of Rabbis, and my specialty was Kabbalah. I'm going to speak about what is Kabbalah, because I'm not assuming that even the word is clear to all of you. And it shouldn't be clear. Actually, if you're intelligent, you must say, I don't know what Kabbalah is. Because, yeah, too many people think they know when they don't. And in Kabbalah, what basically we know is that we don't know. That's the great knowledge of all, in some ways, is to know how much we don't know. But Kabbalah became my field of specialty. I was studying and teaching and researching and writing books. And after a long years in that world, I realized, to make a long story short, that sacred sexuality is in the core of this mystery school. Nevertheless, they don't know, they're embarrassed to speak about it, and they don't know how to practice. Like, they don't know, they can speak about it as a metaphor, but it's hard for them to relate to it as something real, because they are very conservative and they're very afraid of their own body. And it's really hard to even speak about metaphors when you can't speak about your genitals, about the other person, about lovemaking, about kissing. It's when everything is kind of embarrassing, you can't actually even speak about freely about the metaphors. For sure, practice. So that actually started to lead my way out of that world. And I didn't live in one day. It took me years also because I felt that I'm very connected there. So it took me years. I went to academy. I studied the academic side of Jewish philosophy and Kabbalah. Not for an academic degree, but just for research. And I started to work on the aspects of sacred sexuality and sacred love within the Kabbalistic tradition. I wrote a book about the erotic aspect of the ancient temple in Jerusalem, like the Solomon Temple. just from the sources that I found, because no one else gathered these sources. And that book kind of pissed off some of my colleague rabbis. As someone said, he died already, but he said, it's not that it's not true, but it's kind of pornography. You know what is pornography? Is that when you show to the public what should be hidden behind closed doors. So basically he said, it's true what you wrote, but you shouldn't have written it. These are things that shouldn't be told to the public. I think differently. So I continued my way, and I wrote also a book, another book, which I became very interested, is about Lilith. My second book is about the mysteries of Lilith. And I hope to touch upon that today as well in this kind of talk. And in the thick book, it's a thick book about the mysteries of Lilith in Kabbalah. I actually found aspects that were never spoken before. To my great surprise, I didn't expect to find in this ancient tradition aspects that, like fragments that people never analyzed before that. And if you analyze them, you actually see the sacredness and the importance of Lilith. So I'll speak about it later today. That totally led me to say, like, okay, I need to live with Lilith. I need to actually practice those practices, not only write books. I mean, I wrote the book, I finished writing the book in 2000, so we're talking to 20 years ago. That's quite a long time ago. And since then, I am practicing in the world of Tantra, sacred sexuality. It started alone, then Dawn, my partner, came, and 18 years ago, and we're 18 years basically together practicing love, open relationships from the very beginning. So of course we're practicing love and fear and jealousy and sacred sexuality, and we both became teachers in ISTA, the International School of Temple Arts, quite in the beginning of ISTA. Today we're both lead, each one of us is a lead facilitator in ISTA, so that led me to teach in amazing places around the world, including Japan, and I just saw before a beautiful friend from Japan here on the screen. So yeah, including Japan and South Africa and Australia and New Zealand, and I had, you know, as a Jewish person from Jerusalem, it really fills my heart each time that I had students from Arab countries, and I had people, men and women, from Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Lebanon, Egypt, and the Palestinian territories. And that really, really filled my heart with joy, because I really believe and feel that the only way to make peace on this earth is through sharing love, not through political debates, but with actually first loving each other, you know, then all agreements are just, they feel different when you do that with someone you love, or with someone that you suspect and afraid of. And that also is true for in your own household, you know. When you love your partner or your roommates you don't really feel you need any agreements even. It's like, oh, of course I'll wash your dishes kind of thing. Of course, like, you know, whatever. I just like, I love to do things. But when there is no love, everything is like, okay, I'm making the dishes on Sunday and you make the dishes on Tuesday. You start to be a politician. So the more love is in the world, less politicians we need. And if we need them, it's just like for some regulating some how the love flows, like we have here, you know, beautiful aura that will help us regulate this call. But just wouldn't have felt the politicians in our world if we had more love flowing. Um, so yeah, that's what I'm doing in the world. And of course now with the COVID, I got to have a big break in teaching. I've basically in the last years haven't been in one place for as long as now. Um, I was actually stuck, so to say, in New Zealand for 3.5 months. Just came to the United States where my partner's family is. And I'm writing a lot. I'm writing my next book. Yeah, and that's the last thing I will say in the beginning of this, as the opening, is that lately I got a little tired from writing nonfiction, from writing, you know, kind of ideas in the form of ideas, and I became fascinated in writing it as a novel and storytelling. And I published a book that's called Kedesha. I don't know who of you heard of it. Um, I'll publish the link later. It's I published it in Hebrew and English, so the English is on Amazon, and it's all this book comes from also all my research that I've done for so many years on love priestessing, on the priestesses of love that surprisingly, I guess for many, were serving in the temples of love in Jerusalem in the time of King Solomon and later, like according to the Bible. Not and the Bible speaks about how they were destroyed actually. So once I realized that many of the, so to say, the heroes of the Bible are actually not my friends. They actually executed all my friends. My friends are the people they killed. My friends are these priestesses that were, yeah, slaughtered and killed and burned. It changed the whole way I read history and started just like, fuck, you know, history was written by those who won the war, but my friends, so to say, lost. So I started to read history again, and as a rabbi, I had a lot of resources, and wrote this book, Kedesha, about how it actually was, like the subtleties of what it was to be a love priestess in the temple of Astarte, and what actually happened in the time of the monotheistic revolution that is very documented well in the book of Kings. Okay. And that's available on Friday. I'm going to give, and my second class is about specifically about that, and we'll also read from the book. But today we want to talk about Kabbalah. So let's take a deep breath and just like move the body a little, because otherwise we're stuck here in the head. So just like move your body and scratch yourself or whatever you need to move some blood into this beautiful vessel, into the ship that we're sailing in. I'm going to scroll on my screen just so I can see you all. I can say hi because many people joined. Oh, but many people are without camera. Okay, so we don't see you. But we see your name. Okay. So, first of all, what is Kabbalah? Uh, well, the traditional answer to this question would say that the word Kabbalah, which is a word in Hebrew, means receiving. That's the literal meaning also in modern Hebrew. Kabbalah is receiving. Also, when you receive money, like a receipt is literally in Hebrew Kabbalah. When you go to the supermarket and you ask for your receipt, you ask, "Can I have the Kabbalah, please?" So it's really like a simple word in Hebrew of receiving. And that relates to receiving the wisdom from our ancestors. That's how historically it started to be written, because this is a very, very ancient tradition. And in the late medieval time, in the 12th century, they started to write it. I'll maybe speak about why they started to write it. And when they started to write it, they said, this is a Kabbalah that I have. This is something I received from my father, or from my teacher that was teaching, that received it from his ancestors. That's how the word came. It wasn't like a name at the beginning. It was just like people writing those traditions. That was an oral tradition for generations and generations before. And they said, I received it. So it came Kabbalah. Later on, they said like, okay, actually, but Kabbalah is the meaning of this, which is to be receptive. You can immediately feel that it has to do a lot with feminine qualities, because the feminine body is receptive. But this is for everybody. It's to be receptive, and to be receptive to the divine. So many times in Kabbalah, actually in ancient Kabbalistic literature, the Kabbalists would practice being a feminine when the divine is the masculine. So actually practicing making love to God as a feminine, and sometimes as masculine, to the divine feminine. But most of the times, actually, even if they are men, they would relate to themselves, to the Kabbalists themselves, they relate to themselves as the feminine beloved of God, and being receptive. That was the practice. Lately, really lately, a beautiful research was done in the Hebrew University, and was showing actually that those who started to write Kabbalah down were aware of not only Hebrew, but also Arabic. It was started to be written in Spain in the 13th century, and in these areas, because of the Muslim, how do you say, the Muslims conquered southern Spain in the medieval time, and so there was a lot of Arabic also influence. And in Arabic, the word that is close to Kabbalah is takbil. And takbil, which is, I know that in English it might not sound similar, but in Hebrew and Arabic there are root letters. And the kabl is the root letters of Kabbalah, and takbil. And takbil in Arabic meant kiss. Arabic of medieval times, takbil is kiss. And this professor in Hebrew, in the Hebrew University, he just said that my connection is unstable. Do you hear me well? Those who are, yeah, just like say thumbs up if you hear me well. Yeah? Okay, good. Someone says occasionally I freeze. that reminds me that I need to record. I said I promised to record and I forgot. But that's a good time to start recording. Ara, where is the recording button? Do you know?
It actually says you're already recording.
Yeah, I went ahead and started it in the beginning for you.
Ah, lovely.
There is a spotty connection though.
Thank you. You're amazing. So this professor Libes in the Hebrew U says that actually in their mind Kabbalah was the tradition of kiss, which meaning the cosmic kiss, the kiss of the worlds, the kiss of the soul with the divine. It's a very erotic, mystical tradition. And Kabbalah is basically the mystical tradition that the Hebrew nation, the Jewish nation, carried for basically carried and developed for thousands of years. From biblical time, it developed through the prophets and prophetesses, and actually, according to modern researches, in the last 4,000 years or even more. Like sometimes they say, well, we can find actually the roots of that in Sumeria in 3,500 BCE. That will make it like 5,500 years. The roots of this wisdom. So it's quite old. It's a mystical tradition. And it used to be unspoken about unless you were wise and trustworthy. Unless your teacher found you a knowledgeable person, a wise person, and trustworthy, you would not be spoken about. And it didn't matter your age. Actually, my teacher, his father started to teach him this tradition when he was 13. My son, Yehu, some of you know him, came to me when he was 7 years old. And he said, Daddy, I want to be your student. I want you to teach me your practice. It's one of the best practices. It can take years to practice. The year to practice it. You ready to first practice, actually? It's just it's a practice of consciousness. Tell you what I told my son when he was 7. He was like many kids, he loved to play computer games and to watch movies. And I told him, okay, here's your first practice, Yehu. It's very simple. When you watch a movie or when you're in the world of the computer game, don't focus only on the images on the screen, but try to see the screen itself. Like when you're watching a movie, try to be aware of the surface of the screen. When you're in the cinema, try to see the cloth. Not only, don't be totally absorbed in the story and in the characters and what's happening on the screen, but actually be aware of the screen itself. That's the first practice. And then I told him second practice, which is the same in the same line. Do this with a mirror. Aware of the glass of the mirror, not only of your own image, but be aware of the mirror itself and just pay attention for a while. Pay attention to the thing that is carrying the image. And once you're clear about that, do this with reality itself. So when you see a person or whatever you see in the world, after you practice actually feeling the screen and feeling the mirror, you start seeing not only the person that you're talking with in reality, but you start to see what we call reality itself, which is kind of the screen that life is projected on. Or in another way to say that, in a more scientific way to say that, anything that you see, just don't look at the screen now, just look somewhere in your room and just see something, whatever it is, doesn't matter. And now try to be aware to the scientific simple thing that what you actually see is your own eye, is your own, it's not the retina, but what is it called in English? The backside of the eye. What is it? I like the word in English. Rishtit in Hebrew. But the backside, where the picture is coming on top. No, it's not. The retina is someone write me retina. No, the retina is the foreside of the eye. But this is the cornea. I think you're right. Thank you, Michael. So what you actually see is not the word. You see the photons that are meeting the cornea of your eye, the backside of your eye, while neurons are transmitting it to your brain. But literally what we see is like, camera who sees the world actually sees this. It's the inner film it was in when it was still film cameras. We have the same in our own eye, but we forget it. We become addicted to believe the world that we see, and we forget that it's a perception. It's an inner perception. So that was the first step I gave to my son when he was 7. I gave it not in one class, like, first I told him to be aware of the screen of the computer and film, and after he took it as a mission, and after weeks he came to me, he's like, yes, Father, I'm very, I see that while I'm in a movie, even in the middle of, the most intense scene, I'm aware of the of the screen itself. And then I told him about the mirror, and he worked on that for several weeks. And then he came to me and said, yes, I can, first thing I see in the mirror is not myself. Actually, I'm aware of the mirror itself. And then I told him about reality. And the idea behind this is to wean away from being addicted to what we see, to perceive what we see as truth, but to be aware as objective truth, but to be aware that what we see is our own perception. And that there is a mystery of what actually reality is. Because once you understand that what you see is your own perception, the next natural question is like, fuck, so what is reality? Is this reality? Maybe there is more. I actually love quoting the research I saw, it was some years ago, a scientist that he came from optics, but he went into cyber science. And he started to research consciousness and how we perceive reality. And one of the researches that they found, is about beetles, like really, like, you know, beetles, not the singers, but the bug in Australia. Australian beetles of certain kind, their population went really, really down, and no one knew why. And you know, zoologists made a research, and then they realized what's happening. And what was happening is that the male beetle, for some freaking reason, couldn't differentiate between a female and an open beer bottle. So wherever the Aussies left beer bottles in nature, the males of this specific beetle would go and fuck this beer bottle, you know? And therefore, less females got impregnated, or whatever it is you call in beetles, and the whole population went down. Now, why is it important? Because for us, a beetle and a beer bottle it even seems like, what the fuck? Like, how could you mistake a beetle to a beer bottle, or a beer bottle to a beetle? But obviously, the males perceived it the same. They perceive the world through different senses than we do. And for them, beer bottle is good enough. Well, maybe for some men as well sometimes, but so they understood that actually the picture that we see is a production of our brain. The picture of the world that we see is a production of our own brain. And it's not reality. As they called it, it's an interface. It's like, here we are in a class in Zoom, and you have maybe you have me big. I made it that I can see actually everybody because I want to see you. So you have this, I have this grid in front of my eyes. It's not reality. It's an interface that I chose how to see you, and the people who made Zoom available, thank you, made it available to us. Think about that. Everything that you see is not reality itself, but a perception of your brain. Somehow your brain agreed to see the world this way because it seems to be functioning. The simple thing, again, in optics is that your eye, our eye, actually sees everything upside down. I guess you know that. Babies see everything upside down. Our physical eye sees and it's everything upside down. And only when we start to feel the world and what we see up, we actually don't find it there. So as in the first weeks of being a baby, you understand that it's not working and the brain flips the picture. But physically, our eye sees everything upside down because, you know, it's simple in optics, right? Whatever is up goes through my eye and goes down. And whatever is down goes through my eyes, it goes up because there's a little hole. So the picture flips. That's simple optics and biology. So our brain knows how to flip it. And it does it with no problem. You don't wake up in the morning and it's like, okay, let me flip the world. No, this is how our neurons are already wired this way. But once you understand it, you can actually ask yourself, what else? Actually, my eyes see one thing and my brain translate. It was Aldous Huxley, the person who was researching a lot of psychedelics, who wrote this book, The Doors of Consciousness. And when he was researching psychedelics like mescaline, which is in peyote and in San Pedro, he wrote something very beautiful. He wrote that he thinks that what's happening brain-wise in psychedelics is that usually there are filters in our usual perception. There are filters that filter out a lot of information that our survival brain says this is irrelevant for survival. I don't need to see all these colors, you know, I don't need to see the images in the trees, whatever you see. I don't need to see the amazing beauty of a leaf. You know, what might happen to you when you take psychedelics is that you look as like, oh wow, this leaf, and you might find yourself just gazing at this leaf for 30 minutes and not going to work, because who cares about work? It's like, you know, the whole world is now in this leaf. Like, it's beautiful for psychedelics. It's not so functional when you need to go to work and bring some bread home. So what Aldous Huxley realized is that we see all the time everything that we can see on psychedelics. What psychedelics do is they turn off the filters that we usually have that prevent us from seeing all that. So there are filters in the brain. Later on today, like after he died, brain research definitely shows it, that we filter a lot of information that our brain says not important, irrelevant, move on. And what psychedelics do is they turn off these filters. Now, Kabbalists try to turn off these filters all the time, or to know how to go into altered consciousness, so we start to see reality in a different way, to perceive. As I said in the beginning, Kabbalah is about perception. It's about being permeable, I guess the word is. Being receptive, being able to be penetrated like a female body, but that our consciousness is actually penetrated, that our hearts are penetrated by the divine. And we do that by turning off the filters. Turning off some filters and actually allowing ourselves to be more humble. That's how in Kabbalah we will say you're more humble when you turn off your defense mechanisms. It's like you're more vulnerable. We have defense mechanisms, all those mechanisms that prevent us from seeing reality to what it is, are defense mechanisms. And when we turn down defenses, we become more vulnerable, obviously, and more humble. Humble to God, humble to reality itself. It's like saying to the divine, yes, I'm willing to see. I'm really willing to see. I'm turning off my filters. I want to see you. I want to see you, reality. I want to see you for what you are, not for what's functional for me. There's a big difference between saying I want to see what's functional for me and I want to see you. I want to see reality. I want to see the truth. So what's the truth that we see? I'll give you one example from one of the favorite Kabbalists that my favorite that lived in the 18th century. And yeah, I have to say Kabbalah, of course, you can understand it probably. There are many, many branches and many trees, many traditions within this tradition. You know, you can just maybe think about the church. How many orders are under the church? How many churches are in Christianity? You know, and this is only what, since Jesus, it's 2,000 years, and we're talking about something that's older. So there are many, many branches and many ways to understand Kabbalah. And most likely what you heard about Kabbalah came from different branches than the ones that I actually decided to deepen in. I will not go into that now, but my choice of Kabbalistic traditions was the more heart-based. You can say like a kind of a Sufi tradition. That's the Hasidic tradition, and also a lot from what I call the radical Kabbalists. So many Kabbalists that were actually unaccepted by the mainstream of the religion, and actually sometimes persecuted. And as you know, these are the most interesting guys. You know, when they say something and they write something that pisses off all the rabbis and all the you know, the authorities, that means they actually said something that's worth actually reading. So in my own biography, at a certain point, I started to read and be really, really interested in the books of those who pissed off the mainstream of tradition, and that actually led me to be also excommunicated and unaccepted. It's part of my leaving of the religious world, but I'm not going to go into that. I want to actually tell you a beautiful, beautiful tradition that comes from this Kabbalist who lived in the 18th century in the Ukraine. His name was Israel Baal Shem Tov. He was a great master. And he said a simple thing. Every person is a particle of the divine. That's not a new thing from him. This is an old tradition. But what he said is the next line. So every person is a particle of the divine. But he said, but the divine is the complete wholeness of everything. And the complete whole does not have particles, cannot be broken to parts. Something that is really whole in a meaningful of whole cannot be broken into parts. It's always whole. Always whole. Therefore, he said, in every person that we see a particle of the divine, actually, there is the whole divine. It's like a hologram. You know, a picture on this kind of 3D pictures on the glass, that when you break the glass, let's say you have a picture of a sheep on a glass in a 3D in hologram. When you break the glass, you know what's happening? Every piece has the whole picture, just smaller. That's the nature of hologram. If you probably don't do it now, but search it online and you will see in the scientific reason for how it works. It's a different way of how a picture prints itself into by lasers into a glass. So basically, when you break it, you don't get, you know, just the front of the sheep and the back on the sheep, like, you know, when you would tear a page with the same picture, but actually every little piece of glass will have the whole sheep, just smaller. In the same way, he didn't have the hologram, but he understood it from the inner worlds. He said every person is not only a particle of God, because God does not have particle. Every person is God, is the whole fucking God. Every person is the whole divine. And his students were very religious people. When they relate to the divine, they relate to the divine with utter respect and awe and love and longing. And he said, go hug each other with this consciousness. How would it be if you hug another person? If you're a really religious person, if you're really, really devoted to God, and you hug another person, and you realize in the depth of your consciousness that you're hugging God. And that God might be your partner, might be your children, might be your friend on Zoom. So let's have just some seconds or a minute of a little practice of this, just like looking at each other's faces. Maybe those who can turn on the camera and just come closer and allow us to see you. And just let's look at each other with these eyes of just like I'm looking at God. Even if the person themselves, they are not aware that they are God, Goddess, they are the divine. They are. I know it. I look at you and I see that. So just moving from one to the other with this awareness of I'm looking at divine expressions. And scroll the screen because there are other people on screen too. Many of them are without camera. But still we can see the names. And it's like, wow, these are divine names. These are sacred names. Ofer, Lean, Olga, Evelyn, Sophia. What would it be if it would be like divine mystical names? They are. Beautiful. You're also beautiful. I'm so happy to look at you. Maybe write down in our chat, you know, any feeling that you had. Honestly, honesty is the first step. I see there are questions also. I'm reading it. Love, curiosity, peace, openness, feeling bliss. I'm happy to be open. Trust, connection, divine love. So much love and joy to see you guys. Belonging. Lots of questions in your mind. Some are easier and some are more triggering, huh? Okay. The part of a whole. I'll relate to questions. Yeah, much better to interact with people, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so beautiful, we can continue writing. I want to relate to a question that came before on the thread and on the chat and ask, how do we know what is the true Kabbalah? Well, that's a very tricky question because as you can imagine, like in Christianity, everybody will tell you, oh, my church is the truth. That you know, every car seller will tell you that the car that they sell is the best one. I would not tell you that the branches that I come from are the truth. I'll tell you only one thing. For me, they're the deepest. And that's what drew me into these traditions. And to be honest, also drew me out of the tradition because I felt that, yeah, they're going deep, but not deep enough. I want to actually practice sacred sexuality. So, for instance, I don't want to only practice this when I'm hugging a person or looking at them in Zoom. I want to practice this with a beloved when I'm making love with her. I want to make love with my beloved and feel that I'm making love with God. But in this kind of way, so I want to practice while I'm making love. And, you know, they would agree to that, but they would not talk about it, and they would not, you know, go deep into this kind of practice. I needed friends that I can talk with them about making love. And how do you do that? And how do you breathe? And how do you stop? And what do you do? And how do you deal with all the questions of whatever, do I do something good or do I damage, or do I, you know, do you like what I'm doing to you? Don't you like, do you love me? Don't you love me? All those blah, 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 endless voices that are coming while we're making love. you can't actually just ignore them. You need to know how to walk through them if you want to go deep into the place of like, okay, you know, I'm actually making love with God. So as I said, that made me leave this tradition and look for places, look for tantric knowledge and other traditions that actually knew how to guide me in lovemaking. And I have to say, then what happened is that most of my teachings actually came through my soul while I was making love. Like a lot of what I'm teaching today, I'm saying today, not today, Tuesday, but in years, I'm teaching years. Downloads that I got while making love. Most of it with my partner, Dawn, and some with other lovers, and some with myself, or with nature. Nature, by the way, was my first lover. As a teenager, I was growing in nature, growing up in the desert, and I didn't. My first, if you ask me about my first sexual, experiences, it was with nature, not with humans. Was going out to nature, meditating, and then finding that I'm actually also a sexual being, and checking my sexuality with nature, and yeah, really literally making love to mud and to rocks and to trees, and so very connected to nature in this way. So that was just relating to which branch of Kabbalah is the truth. I don't think there is anything that anyone can say is the truth. You can only say it talks to you. It engages your authenticity. It engages the depth of my heart. That's what works for me. When I choose who to study with, that's what guides me. If I feel that this engages the depth of my heart, and if I'm becoming more authentic and more real, more vulnerable, if it touches this place in me that feels like, oh fuck yes, not just like the head is saying like, oh wow, it sounds convincing, but actually if my heart says a hell yes to that. Walking in the path of heart. Okay, I'm going to read a little bit of someone said, Mijo. Ah, hi, Mijo. Hi, hello. Mijo from Brazil. Hello. It seems like Kabbalah and Tantra have a lot in common. Yeah, they do. Some branches of Kabbalah and some branches of Tantra. Also, Tantra is not one thing. Tantra is also a whole world of traditions. Even the ancient traditions, not even if you take away all the modern branches. Heaviness on your chest. Okay. So Jewel Wong, I don't know where you are on the screen, but you said, oh, hi. So you said lots of questions in my mind. Some expressions of God are easier than others. I don't know if that's what you meant, but what I hear in this question is like, yes, you know, if every person is an expression of the divine, some people are easier than others to deal with, or even to realize that they're God. Huh? You know, some people is like, oh, this is whatever junk. Yeah, of course, some people triggering, some people are triggering us. And that takes us to another aspect that will lead me to speak about Lilith as well. Just want to check time. Yeah. One thing in my tradition, the traditional way I was studying is when the teacher, after like 3-4 hours of class, he would say, okay, now let's go deep. You know, so for me, just we're talking an hour. That's like, okay, we just barely scratch the surface. But and we have an kind of 20 more minutes. So I'll relate to that in this way. Shadow work, shadow work. There is a verse in the Bible, in Psalms, that says, in Hebrew it says, Adonai tzilcha al yad yaminecha. God is the shadow on your right side. God is your shadow. And the shadow in in-depth psychology is relating to aspects of ourselves that we don't want to see and to be seen. Shadow relates to aspects that are part of who we are, but actually we don't want to admit that they are part of who I am. So if, for instance, if I want to, just I make it simple, if I want you to see me as a very generous person, because maybe as a child I got it that it's nice to be generous, and I got it that whenever I give stuff to my friends, they all love me, and so it was like my survival mechanism said, like, okay, be generous, it's good. But of course I'm also stingy and I want to keep an egotist, but I don't want you to see this, and I don't want myself to see this. So these parts of me go to shadow. That's a simple way to speak about it. But if I'm not relating to my own stinginess, because I'm so busy with presenting myself as the generous person that I am, what would happen to my stinginess? It goes to the shadow. And one of the ways that it shows is by I start to be really triggered by stingy people. I really hate stingy people. My own shadow projects itself from from my own subconsciousness to people out there that can vibrate with this, with my shadow, and show me back, reflect back to me aspects of myself that I have neglected. So one of the great things of knowing yourself is, it's not fun what I'm going to say now, but is make a list of the people that are difficult for you to deal with. Make a list of why. You know, this person is stingy, this one is egotist, this one is too sexual, this one is unsexual, this one is ugly, this one is stupid, whatever, you know, just like whatever. Be honest, and then welcome to your own shadows. Everything that triggers you out there is just a part of you that you don't want to look at. So you see it outside in a triggering way. Now, the thing is like this, it's not, when you work with your shadow, it's not that you stop seeing this, you just stop being triggered. So I can see that you know, let's say that I worked on my inner stingy part. So I might see a person that is stingy, but it will not trigger me. It will not like, oh, fuck this stingy person. It was just like, it will be full of compassion. It's like, oh yeah, I see you stingy. I know I'm stingy as well. I know and people say like, what, you're stingy or not? You're so generous. Like, no, yes, that's what I express. But inside of me, I know I'm wanting to keep things for myself. And And I'm aware of my egotism, and I'm even the way that even giving to you is part of my egoic survival mechanism. So I become more aware and more compassionate, and I would not be just triggered by others. So whenever you're triggered by someone, whether it's your family member, your dog, or the police, it's parts of you that you're not willing to look at. Simple as that. And if we are really working inside, every trigger is just a gift. God is the shadow on your right side. Why is on your right side? In Hebrew, on your right means like for your to help you. It's like I'm on your side. I'm on your right side. That's kind of like I'm here to help you. So God is the shadow to help you. That's actually how you can read it. So whenever you realize that someone is triggering you, and you then realize that actually they point to your own shadow, you can say, thank you. You're actually on my right side. You're here to help me. That, by the way, also relates to many people ask, because Dawn and I live in open relating for 18 years, and many people ask us, how do you deal with jealousy? As if, this is the only thing you have to deal with in relationships. But it's like saying jealousy is a great teacher. It's like when I'm jealous of, my beloved going with someone else, it's really not about them. But then it's like, it's a great teacher. It's like, oh, thank you. I have some, if I'm triggered, it means that I have something to work with, that something is triggering my insecurities or my shadows that, can be different things that I don't want to look at. So now let's talk a little bit about Lilith, because I promised. Lilith is a shadow aspect of the feminine. There's also the shadow aspect of the masculine, which is kind of the parallel. I will not speak about it because it's less, people are less familiar with these names. Lilith became, because of a lot of feminist people who worked with archetypes, Lilith became known. So Lilith is an archetype of the shadow side of the feminine, of the feminine in all of us, but also specifically in women. When I say shadow side, I mean the side that we don't want to acknowledge, that society doesn't want to acknowledge. So in each of us, men and women, we have aspects that society tells us, be like this, be Bob. Bob is doing this, be Bob. Society is telling us, here is a role model, be like that. You see this woman, she's a great mother, be like that. You see this woman, she's a successful woman, be like that. Whatever it is, society tells us who to follow. Society also tells us who not to follow, who is the bad girl. The femme fatale. The one who breaks families, the one who uses her sexual magic for her own desires and doesn't give a fuck about what's happening with the other. The one who is loyal, loyal mainly to herself and not to any other man. The one who is hypersexual, we call her usually, or society would call her a whore, a prostitute, a cunt, a slut. Lilith is all of them. What Lilith is not is Eve. Eve, or Chava in Hebrew, the wife of Adam. So in mythology, in the Jewish mythology, ancient mythology, it says that actually the first woman on earth was Lilith. But Adam and Lilith didn't get along together because Lilith didn't want to be submissive. And Adam had this idea that he needs a submissive woman. So they were fighting all the time. The sex was shitty. And she said, fuck that. And she just left. She left home. She left paradise. She left Eden. And then God created Eve. And Eve came second. Like Adam and Eve were created together, not from each other. But the biblical story is that Eve was created from Adam, from the rib, whatever, from an aspect of Adam. And she came second. And there's no big questions of like who should be submissive, right? Like I've been here before. You were brought here. You were created to help, to be my assistant here. So no big questions. So all the quarrels, all the debates that came between Adam and Lilith were settled with Adam and Eve. And Eve is the part of the woman that wants to be a good wife. Actually, in Hebrew, the meaning of the word, we say the word Eve is Chava, and the word Chava has double meaning. The other meaning of Chava, actually three meanings. The second meaning of Chava is farm. So when you say someone has a farm, you say this person has a Chava. So it's really the same word. Because Eve, that's what Eve is about. Let's have children and land and property. Let's have orchards and wheat and livestock and whatever. The other meaning, I said there are three meanings of the word Eve, is of Chava. The other meaning is like Chavat Da'at. To expression, to express yourself, and women, the feminine in us is expressive. The feminine in us is the expressive part of us. Actually, in Hebrew, Adam comes from the word dom, which is silent, stillness. It's like Adam and Eve, basically in biblical Hebrew, means stillness and expression. Lilith comes from ancient Assyrian language that means a storm wind, like a tornado. That's called Lil and Lalu. And so Lilith is a kind of a tornado. She's, and you can imagine what a tornado is. It's like, it's huge energy that you can't control, uncontrollable. That's why Adam, who is not the shadow side of the masculine. Adam is he's the nice guy. He's a good guy. He couldn't deal with Lilith. But of course, Adam would fantasize about Lilith. So in Kabbalah, basically, there's Eve and Lilith. They are the two sides of the feminine. Eve is the part that you would want as your wife, and Lilith is the part that you would take as your mistress or as your secret lover, actually. Lilith is the one that everybody is fantasizing of, but would never marry. Eve is the one that people marry, but then they get bored with. That's the simple thing that's happening in society. Basically, when I was married 18 years with a beautiful woman before dawn. And when I came to this kind of work, to this kind of sexual work and shadow work and Lilith work, and I said, like, I knew that I need to go and explore sexuality in a deep way. And it didn't work for my ex-wife. So we really separated as good friends. We still are. Because she knew, it was like, yeah, this is authentically who you are, but it's authentically not what I need. And then I was praying to meet Lilith, and I met Dawn. It works. So I actually really met a woman that knows how to hold her Lilith aspect, not as a shadow that is ignored, but actually as a shadow that is embraced. So the depth of shadow work is actually how to embrace your shadows. And when we embrace our shadows, they stop being threatening, and they stop being destructive, but they become actually a huge power and a huge resource of connecting to what we call the dark powers, which dark is not bad. That's another thing. We work with it a lot in ISTA seminars, and especially in level 2. So I can't actually explain it deep enough here. But dark and evil are not the same. There are dark powers. I mean, a simple way to understand it is like you find sometimes a lot of comfort in the dark, literally in the dark. You turn off the lights and you feel cozy. Dark is not bad, Dark is, hello darkness, my old friend. There's actually specific coziness and sweetness in the dark, but it's dark. And part of good work, good conscious work with shadows, is that we start to know how to work with the dark powers in a way that is not threatening. We're not like children are afraid of the dark because they lose control. Once we grow up, we're not afraid of losing control, of giving up control. We're actually going into the dark open-heartedly. So shadow work, embracing our shadows is a way to work with our dark powers, not from a place of fear, but actually from a place of claiming our wholeness. And it brings a lot of power, but also a lot of sweetness, actually, and love, deep love. Actually, when people are ignoring their dark, they're afraid of the dark, and they're only light, be afraid of their shadows. People who are only light, their shadows, that means that they never embrace their shadows. And their shadows, once their shadows are usually undercover and repressed. When these shadows blow up, they're dangerous because they're unowned. So working with Lilith is actually, working with your inner Lilith is actually starting to own who you really are in the aspects that you don't like. your shadow aspects, what you don't like about yourself, starting to look at it, to own it, to make love with it, to look, to feel how, what does it mean when if I'm everything that I think about myself, but I'm also the opposite of that. I'm everything the society wants to see in me, but I know, I know what's happening under the surface. So once you start to work with it, whether you're male or female, it doesn't matter. You actually become a more reliable person and more deep, because you have depth, or the depth of the shadow. So I see that it's 1:24, and our class was supposed to be until 1:30. So before I ask you to write some more, I want to say that, as I said, this is just like, scratching the surface. And I have, many people were asking me to teach Kabbalah. I was teaching Ista, and only sacred sexuality and sacred shamanism, and a lot of the Kabbalistic aspects were not coming to the surface. So I decided to record 28 classes and put them online. And so there is an online course of Kabbalah of Love. I made, actually ask my assistants to make a special coupon code of 25% discount for the people of the festival, for the time of the festival. So let me see if I can actually send you the link. That would be awesome if I find how to do that. Yep, here it is. Yeah. No. So here's the link. Kabbalah at teachable.com. Kabbalah is my website. Kabbalah, yeah. Kabbalah is Teachable is this Kabbalah course. It has 2 classes for free, and then you can register. And if you put this code, which is the name of the festival, one world. If you put one world as in a place that asks for a coupon, you will get 25% off. Only during the festival time. It will work. So I'll put it also in the festival kind of lounge, whatever it is. So this is just, to make it available, and to, so you can go deeper with this tradition if you find that it's interesting for you. I would love to. And then there is also a group, everybody that is studying with this. There's a Facebook group and ask questions. I go there every once in a while and answer questions and stuff like that. Okay. So, sorry, did you say death or depth? I said depth, deep depth. Okay, thank you guys. Do you have any resources for books or ways to learn more about Lilith? I'm afraid not. My book, which I wrote is not available in English, and also in Hebrew it's out of print. Many people are searching for it, and I keep saying I'm not printing it again, because I wrote it in 2000. Since, in these last 20 years, I learned so much more that I can't just print the old book again. It's not up to date for me, and to rewrite it is a big work. Write another, yeah, thank you. So Friday, I'll have my second class here, and that would be dedicated to the, part of it will be actually, linking to Lilith, because it's going to be sacred priestessing, the Kedesha. And the term Kedesha came from ancient Sumeria to ancient Israel, the same as Lilith. They're all connected to the same ancient Sumerian tradition. I will speak about it more on Friday in my class here. So, if you want to join us. Thank you. Someone said that Helene was working with Lilith for archetype for several months. I summarize it. Thank you. Yeah, I worked with it for the last 20 years or more. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, beloveds. I really hope, this class can open gates for all of us. And just remember the first practice I gave. And when you hug someone and when you see someone, just inside of you, just really realize they are the divine. They're not a part of the divine, because the divine doesn't have parts. And really go into the feeling. Someone asked before, is it seeing or feeling? This is a feeling thing. The seeing is just actually taking away the illusion that what I see is reality. What I see is a functional thing. Helps me function, but the feeling is feeling the whole divine within this person. And try making love. I hope you do. Try making love and hugging and feeling and, making love with your beloved. Feeling that you're making love with the divine itself. And make lovemaking an act of awe and surrender. This is how, lovemaking becomes also a place of receiving messages and downloads. It's not when you ask for downloads, it's actually when you surrender to God, to the divine, through your beloved. Not away from your beloved. Many religious people would think like, okay, I don't focus on my beloved, I focus on God. No. God is in your beloved. Your beloved is just an expression of the divine. So go deep into that, and may love guide us all. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Aura, for holding the room together.
Good. I'm going to take you off recording now. Let's do it. Stop.